Mario Kart World is full of all types of crazy and wacky shortcuts. In most Mario Kart games, it's simply using a mushroom to get through some grass patches or bust through some wooden crates blocking off an alleyway. But with Mario Kart World, there's a lot more. Around every nook and cranny, there's a wall or rail trick that you can do, which leads to alternate and branching paths. And today, I'm going to show you every single possible shortcut and alternate route in every single track of the game. Now, I will not be showing the fastest and most optimal route, as that is still being calculated by players, and there's a whole lot to dive into with that, but I think it's just a good idea to have in knowledge all of the different shortcuts and alternate routes depending on where you are in the race, because sometimes the optimal route might not fall through correctly, so you'll need to know what's the next best place to go. So this video took me a very long time to make, so please make sure you leave a like and subscribe if I was able to teach you anything new at all today. It goes a long way. Let's see how many people we get to subscribe from just today's video alone. Thank you for tuning in, and let's dive into every shortcut and secret alternative path within Mario Kart World. Here we're starting with the Mushroom Cup, and of course, Super Mario Bros. Circuit. This is the very first track of the game, and it's overall a pretty simple track. You'll start off with rails on both sides. You can take either the left or the right one, but they'll both end up in the same area. And once you get through this tunnel area, you can actually do a flip onto the side wall on either side and flip back onto the track for some extra boost and speed. Now, the end of the track is where it gets tricky. There's multiple different paths you can take, and the first one will be the path to the right that we'll talk about. If we hug the wall to the right all the way, you can actually ride all the way across it and flip onto this guardrail by the crowd. This takes you all the way around the crowd and then to a giant billboard, which you can also trick off of to the right and flip back onto the track. The second option you have is staying to the right, but not going towards that wall, instead hitting the fly ramp and landing on the guardrail onto the left, flipping left onto the green guardrail at the bottom. Also, the good thing about coming from this side is if you have a mushroom, you can blast through these tires at the very beginning and hit this guardrail that takes you into the inner corner of the track. Now, you also have other options like staying on the left guardrail and riding it all the way down, or using a mushroom through the sand area with the wooden boxes. Crown City has a lot of options as well. You can go all the way to the end of this left turn when you're starting the race and just continue on normally. But if you look carefully, there's a street that you can turn down before it, which leads you into a little cross section and then back onto the normal path. But if you look even closer, you'll notice a little guardrail that you can ride on this side street, which takes you to the rooftops. It probably isn't the fastest, but it is something to add to the race if you really want to take that path. In this next section, you can actually ride the guardrail in the center and flip off of either the left or right side of the walls in order to get some more boost. At the end of this section, if you have a mushroom, you can also blast right through the grass area in the wooden crates, and you can hang to the right in order to go behind this building and cut this section down a little bit quicker than you could regularly. This long street straightaway, you can actually wait to the very end of each guardrail and jump from each one to the next in order to get some speed boost. If you want, you can even jump off this side wall here as you're going underneath the highway. Or you can even use the medians in the middle to just grind in the middle and switch lanes if you want. Now, this section is where you can get kind of crazy. I don't know if any of these are optimal, but it's stuff you can definitely do, like grind rail off the top of that giant billboard by hanging to the left off the jump. But if you're really good, if you still hang off the left with this jump, you can grind on the first billboard and land on the second billboard before you flip over all the construction signs and make a quick U-turn back onto the track. And flying down into the main street again, you can veer off to the left and spin into the wall, back onto the rail, and then back into this middle section where you can also trick off of the light post or land back in the center rail. Or if you want, you can fly over to the right and flip off of that right billboard and land on that counterpart rail, and then back into the center and once again off the street lights if you want, or on that middle rail. But we're still not done with Crown City. You can actually cut this area and flip off of this little curb before going onto that long street. And if you want, you can do a double drift where you can hit that curb even longer out into the left and then hit the street. This section also has two grass and wooden box areas that you can use two mushrooms in order to dash through both sections. But this is one of the tracks in the game that has an extremely cool trick. If you wall ride on this left wall, grind the long rail, and then flip left at the very last second, you can actually do a trick off of the palm tree and back onto a side building path. Whistle Stop Summit is also home to some really cool alternate paths and shortcuts. Right before you exit the cave to the final section, this is where you'll have to lock in because there's so many different paths. If you hang on to one of the train track rails, you can flip to this right yellow one, land on a second yellow one, ride it all the way to the last rail, and you can flip off of a green billboard and back onto the railing system, which you can then continue to take down, and you can even flip off of one more yellow rail before it wraps all the way back around to the start of the track. But if you want to hang to the left outside of the cave, you can jump onto this yellow guardrail and do a wall jump off of this billboard as well and back onto the railroad tracks, which leaves you kind of in that same area. You can also choose to completely ignore the billboard and just jump on this yellow rail down here and land on these ramps. Now odds are if you don't have enough speed, you're gonna need a mushroom in order to drive through that black coal. And if you have another mushroom with you, you can dash right through the grass area and the wooden boxes. Or if you want, you can come out of the cave section into the middle track and just save your mushrooms for any of the coal areas, like underneath this bridge to the right. Now there's another shortcut you can do towards the beginning and you don't even need a mushroom. If you hold your charge jump and jump onto this left wall, you can jump onto the right one and then back onto the track, where you don't even have to drive all the way around this section. And when you wrap back around the finish line for lap 2, you can hang to the left and actually take a separate guardrail section all the way up this hill where you can jump off the wall or maybe land on a second rail, just depending on how you want to handle it. The last track of the Mushroom Cup is DK's Spaceport. There's lots of little walls that you can actually ride up and grind on the rail, like the two in the beginning. Personally, I like the one on the right where you can fling to the top path and quickly drift around it. Now, most of your shortcuts are going to be to use mushrooms or invincible items in order to go through these little green pallet areas that looks like grass, and there's one on each turn. Sometimes there's a fireball or sometimes an oil drum. You can dash through the oil drums, but just watch out for the fireballs. And every single section has rails on the sides that you can grind on if you absolutely need to. This section with the wall jumps is where you can get pretty creative. I like to jump off the red wall and land on the top path. Now if you want, you can jump off that red wall, land on the top path, and then jump onto the next wall where you can continue your wall jumps all the way into the very end. Or you can drop straight down for the next ramp where you want to ramp right off the corner of this glowing wall, where you'll then jump super high on the red wall and you can keep bouncing off of each wall until the very end again. And if you want to be really fancy, if you get high enough on the walls and hold on to that wall ride a little longer, you can actually flip all the way to the right rail at the very end. It's probably slower, but still, you can do it if you want. And also remember, if there's chaos pursuing on the track on this final section, you can actually just jump onto these side walls and just ride the rail all the way the rest of the way. Just remember, you have to jump off eventually, so be careful not to slam into Robo DK at the very end. Desert Hills is one of the least interesting tracks in this game, and only has a couple of shortcuts if you even want to call them that. There's one right here with the boulder off in the sand to the left. If you want, you can cut this corner to the right through the grass in between the torch and the wall. In the open area, there's only one shortcut underneath this bridge where you can use a mushroom through the sand, and you can use another mushroom to cross the other sand area, which will then lead you to two different ramps. The top ramp is a gliding ramp that you can glide straight to the goal, or you can hang to the right toward this water area in these wooden crates. Now, a regular mushroom could get you through those crates, or you can just drive or fly past them and hit this ramp in order to continue forward. You also have a smaller ramp on the bottom portion where you can just drive up and jump off of the end there, or you can ride on its wall. But there's one more shortcut. If you look to the right wall after coming around the bend, you can actually jump up on it and grind rail. The same as the left wall, you can also take the bottom smaller ramp, and there's another grind rail on that one as well. To me, Guy Bazaar is one of the most bizarre maps in the game. This one is full of alternate routes and crazy different ways you can go. So if you want it to stay basic, you can go down the middle of the market, and as you'll notice, there is an area with crates underneath one of the tents. You can actually use a mushroom to blast through it and hang on the inside wall underneath the cabana. But instead of going through the market, you can hang into the left wall once you enter, which will grind you all the way around this pipe, which you can then wall flip back onto the next pipe and into the following one as well and continue going. If you're good enough, you can continue like this. But I'll show you one more time, as this could be very confusing. The craziest part is you can keep this going if you want in the next section by jumping off and hitting the wall at the right angle and continuing to drive across it, which will lead you to another top section where you can take that rail all the way down and continue jumping off of more rails like this. What I just showed you gets even crazier, but I'll show you that more in a second. Now there's an easier path you can take in the market by just jumping on the rails, and you can actually just grind on the different rails, which will then lead you to some of the parts that I already showed. You can mix and match how you want, and I just pretty much showed you the ultimate way to ride the rails, so you go with whatever works best for you. Now remember when I told you it can get crazier. At the very start of the race, you can jump on over to this rail. You don't need a mushroom, but it definitely does help. And then you can forward flip onto these two rails, and then it takes you to a completely top section where you can ride that all the way around. ground. Instead of hopping off to the right to the top section, you can hop forward to a completely different rail section, which then leads you to the rail section that I've already showed you, which is already super crazy. So you can go pretty much 90% of this track without touching the main ground, and this is how it would look once you do everything correctly. And then at the very end, you can use a mushroom to dash through this little sand area into the finish line. Maybe you weren't lucky enough in the race to get to that top part. Well, you can then drive all the way down to this bottom section over here with pots to the left, which also gives you 2 alternate routes. You can take the ramp like normal, but shoot off to the left in order to get those rope shortcut area. Or when you get ready to take the underground ramp, hang to the left, and you can actually trick off of that wall, which will lead you to this right wall, which you can also ride all the way up to this boardwalk. Wario Stadium is pretty much just do as you go. None of these walls are absolutely needed, but some of them do cut turns a little tightly. Pretty much every single wall in this area is rideable. They all have yellow rails on top, and some can even connect to others that are far off. For instance, when you make your first left turn and get to this big ramp, hang to the right wall, and use your momentum in order to jump off one rail to the other. Most of the time you'll probably need a mushroom unless you're doing some tricks, but you can land on the next rail and just keep it going, where you can continue to go from wall to wall all the way until you get to the big bend. You get to this bend, use the left ramp and jump all the way up onto the wall, where it'll then let you grind in a very tight section around the bend, where you can then flip off and get ready to hit the giant ramp. And then if you have a mushroom, you can blast left through the mud and tires area. But there's another little trick that you can do which might not be worth it, but it's something that you can do if you absolutely want to. When going around the bend, charge a hop and you can jump on that back wall, which will take you in a couple rail systems right to the finish line. But once again, it does look like it might be a lot slower than just turning around the bend and just racing normally. Airship Fortress's main shortcut is at the very beginning. What you want to do is jump onto one of the right or left rails. Now the left one is for the faster side, as you can flip back over to the right one around the bend, but that's for a different video as it takes some tech to get used to. This one is just showing you the different paths that you can take. You want to ride that right rail as far as you can go here and jump off before going around the bend, because if you hang on too long, you'll just fly off of the backside. Now where the flame pillars are on the inside of the ship, there's now 2 red rails that you can ride, so you can choose which one you want to ride based on the positioning of the flames. Next we move on to the Star Cup with DK Pass. There's a shortcut right at the very beginning where you don't have to hit this crazy sharp turn. Instead, just do a trick at the end of this curb and then do another trick off of the pole in order to land on the other side. It's fairly simple. Now if you want, you can cut the snow bank on the tight turn as well if you have a mushroom or 2. And shortly after that one, there's yet again another snow bank that you can use a mushroom to get through. Now this next section is just completely up to the player really, as there's different types of tree branches that you can ramp off of. There's a couple to the left and a couple to the right. Not to mention there's a whole dedicated path to the right with a rail system where you can just ride the wall. Now on this final ramp, you don't even need to hit it. You can use a mushroom on the sides with the snow hills, and if you're good enough, you can actually land on the guardrail and ride it to the next one that wraps around the whole ending of the track, which also has a secret billboard that you can actually flip onto and ramp off of as well. And this right one as well leads to a secondary rail, but you'll want to jump off this one fairly quick because you have to make the tight turn around the corner. There's also a ramp by the finish line where you can use a mushroom to take, but I don't see the main point in this. This might just be for the open world. Starview Peak isn't really Peak in this game. I don't know, to me it just feels like a very bland version of Ice Ice Outpost with 2 very obvious colors that track also had, but there's not many shortcuts here, like really at all. There's a couple of snow banks that you can burn mushrooms through, but besides that, if you just follow the giant snow rings and just glide through the rings as well, you'll gain some speed boosts, and there's really nothing else that's secret about this track, unless there's something that I just completely am missing here. It's pretty bland. Sky High Sundae, on the other hand, is now full of new secrets. Off the first ramp, you can choose many different paths to take. You can veer off to the left and actually grind on this ice portion of the cookie wall and jump off the second wall in order to reach this right side high area, which then leads you to this guardrail on the entire right side. You follow the guardrails and you can continue riding them all the way up to the next ramp section. If you're coming in at a lower path, you can also just wall jump off of the cookie as well. Of course, we still have the option to just fly through the ice cream cone, which is significantly smaller than it was in Tour and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, or you can immediately just veer off to the right in order to grind on the ice on the right side of those cookies. Or if you want to keep it basic, just grind on the right rail without taking the ramp, and you can switch rails or stay on that same right path. Doing so will keep you on the bottom path, but you can still use a mushroom in order to dash through the chocolate fudge on the ground because it will slow you down without a mushroom. Going up the green and pink ramps, you can choose either side, and I like to choose the outside paths first. So let's go to the green outside. You can actually grind on all the ice rails and the tops of the cookies going all the way down. And the same exact thing applies for the left side, where you can actually grind on all the tops of the cookies as well. But if you're on the bottom portion, you can still do wall flips and jumps on the sides of the cookies. Something else you can do is take the inside rails of the ramps and do an early flip where you can actually perfectly time a landing in between the two paths, which will take you into an underneath path with a boost ramp. Now this is kind of a tricky one to hit at a perfect angle, so it's really up to you when you think you should jump and land on a boost pad in order to move forward quicker, but there still is a really cool shortcut down there, so it is pretty worth taking. Now if you have a mushroom, you can just take the top lane and blast through the boxes if you want. And the final shortcut is you can actually ride on this side wall before going around the giant bend. You can actually just do tons of tricks on the wall as you go around. It'll keep you connected to it so you don't have to worry about falling off. Wario Shipyard has some cool parts to it where you can actually ride on this beginning rail on the right if you want, and there's a little sand area where if you drift correctly you can actually use a mushroom to go over it. Now this part is tricky because you have to charge a jump and it'll only work if you're touching the water. So if you're bobbing up and down, you have to make sure that you're hitting the water before jumping, but you can jump into this little pipe which will wrap you around the corner quicker. In this next section you can use a mushroom to dash through this little sand island area, and you can take the inside or the outside part of the ship. The inside seems to be a little quicker, but it doesn't really matter as it drops you off in the same location. Now this bottom section towards the end of the track is where you have most of your options. You can take the regular cannon and try to land on the mast of the ship to the left, which you can then flip over to the right one and then into the finish line. Of course, there's more options that might not be necessarily as fast, but you can do them. You can hop onto this guardrail and get to the top of the cannon, where then you have two options up here as well. You can veer off to the right while not tricking and dash on a mast off to the right and then off this side wall and then back onto the track. Or you can use this top ramp to hit the same shortcut you would on the bottom ramp by just flipping on both of the masts of the ship. You also don't need the rail to get up there. You can jump off this right wall, climb up, and there's a secret ramp up here where you can then get to the top of that cannon, which you can once again do that same trick there once again. Or you can take another path off the top ramp that takes you to the far left, and you can jump off this little castle structure and off the wall and then back onto the track again. And just like the Mario Kart 7 version of this track, you can jump off this final ramp before finishing across. But there's another thing that you can do here. If you have enough speed, you can actually reach the right guardrail to keep your momentum and continue forward a lot faster. Now Koopa Troopa Beach might be one of the most boring tracks in the entire game. It's a super small circle where you're constantly drifting towards the left, and there's really no shortcuts. I mean, there's a couple grass sections that you can force mushrooms through, besides this one area where if you use a mushroom and hold a jump, you can actually dash through this box area. But once again, make sure you trigger that mushroom as you're holding your charge jump as well. Faraway Oasis has a bunch of cool branching paths as well. From the start, you can use a mushroom to actually get through this area of grass on the right. As you're going around this large turn, if you take the bottom path or the top path, you can jump off on the right or left guardrails, and then center yourself in the middle guardrail where you can once again jump off to the left, even jump off this little sign and back onto the rail. Now you have some options here. You can jump off and aim for this right rail, where then you can either take it and continue off to the right, then you'll be forced to jump off and ride another rail on the top section all the way to the end of this track, or you can hop off the rail early in order to get to this top left section, where then you can jump on the wall, back onto the top section, and back onto that rail. Well, maybe you don't want to take that right area at all. You want to just take this left section. You can continue on the boardwalk on the top path, but at the very end, if you hang to the left, you can actually jump off of this side wall, ride it, and then flip off again. Maybe you want to keep it even more simpler. You can just use a mushroom to dash through this horde of bulls, and just use another mushroom to dash through these wooden crates, but make sure you cut the corner tight or you'll fling yourself off the waterfall. There's also another section at the very end of this turn with some wooden crates that you can dash through as well, but there's also two separate hidden crates that are on each side of the finish line, which is weird, but if you want, you can choose them, where the right one you just take a mushroom, which you could even use to continue going through that shortcut part at the beginning, or you can go through the left crates on the left side of the finish line and jump onto this little rail system. For Peach Stadium, you can immediately jump onto the rails on the right side and jump over to the next one as well, and if you have a mushroom, you can hop off and maybe even dash to the grass. It's a little awkward, so maybe you're best bet is just to not hit these rails if you have a mushroom and save it for a tight turn where the tires are. On the first big ramp of the track, if you hang off to the left, you can actually hit this rail system, which will take you to a higher portion of the track, which then will split into two separate sections. You can take the lower left one in order to hit this ramp and continue onto the track, where the upper right one, you can actually keep on moving forward and higher onto the track and then land on the giant rail system that wraps around the inside of the bend for a quicker turn. But if you miss that left rail entirely, it's not over yet. You can actually wall jump off of this side wall, and you can jump on either the left path and still reach the right path as well. If you're not taking the inside rail and you're drifting around the final bend, you can actually charge up a jump and jump on this side wall up onto the rail system and find a hidden glider path. If you're really good, you can even do an extra trick boost off of one of the pipes. If you want, you can even flip into the side of the pillar of the castle and then use a mushroom in the grass to boost forward even faster. Peach Beach is absolutely filled with shortcuts as it's a completely different track this time around. The first lap is the one that we always know and love from Peach Beach on the GameCube, where there is a shortcut on the outside of the turn, which takes you on some boost ramps towards the water. And coming around the bend where the classic version of this track would end, you can actually use a mushroom in order to dash through the grass. But now this is where things get a lot different. The second section has a giant water fountain, which you can hop on and even trick off of in order to get some extra boosts. The following section has branching paths, but starting off with the middle path, the most basic one, you can actually dash through some wooden crates over here by using a mushroom. But it's what happens on the other paths that gets kind of wacky. Let's start off with the right side. You can trick off the stairs and land on this pipe, which then flings you over to this guardrail. You can then fling yourself over with a good time jump and land on the next guardrail against the wall. This will take you around and then to a top right section of the castle, where you can then drive on the roof. There's another guardrail that you can trick off of and even jump off the wall beside it, and then it branches into two separate roofings, one on the far right and one on the far left. You can stay on the far right and continue to make your way down each and individual roof, as there's two giant beams on each section of the roof. This section, you can also decide to veer off to the left a little bit and hit this beam and then ride this rope, which you can then fling over to the left side of the castle roofs, which also has its own section of roofs that you can drop all the way down. If you're good enough, you can even land down on the drawbridge chains and back on another rail. And you don't need a rope to get over there. If you want, you can just drive over to the left section and then jump off the wall in order to get to that left side of the roofing. Let's take it all the way back where we have the three branching paths. Instead of going to the middle or to the right, let's go to the left, and you can ride up the wall and onto this rope, where you can bounce off the wall and back onto the rope multiple times and then drift around this little balcony area. Now, if you stuck down on the bottom path, you'll enter a glider section. There's two ramps hanging off the walls that you can take. If you take the right ramp, you can jump off the right wall and onto the left roofing. Or if you decide to fly over to the left ramp, you can jump off the left wall and fling yourself over to the right roofing. You can even pass both of these ramps and pick one of the two ledges to jump onto, where you can jump straight onto a rail, then the drawbridge chains, and then back onto another rail. And then for the final stretch, there's one more shortcut that you can take in the water. Using a mushroom to break through the crates, you can even jump onto two guardrails before cutting the tight corner. Salty Speedway also has some crazy tricks that you can do. While driving through the moat, you can actually choose to jump onto the two paths, one on the left and one on the right. But for now, we're just going to focus on what's ahead. You can jump up on this wall and ride it all the way to the top. It's one of the few walls in the game that lets you ride it automatically to the railing on the top part. You continue down this path and you can jump up and ride the railing on a couple of awnings before making a right turn. After the right turn, you can jump off and land on the wall, landing on another railing, back onto the wall, and then back over onto a bridge, crossing the entire track. This then leads you to a glider ramp where you can fly towards the end of the track, where there's another shortcut. There's a bunch of boxes up here, so if you have a mushroom, hit a very tight drift or you'll fling off. Make sure your drift is very tight to the wall as you're using your mushroom across. It's kind of hard to do and it's going to take some practice. Now, if you come back around, you'll see two staircases. If you choose the right one and then jump down into the middle river, you can pop back up and jump on land for a little bit before moving forward. It's a quicker path by going straight towards your destination instead of making multiple turns and bends. Now, maybe you decide to take the normal bottom path towards the end. Well, you can still jump on two different areas on land. The left side has a bunch of sidewalks and bridges that you can cross over and even rails that you can ride. And the right side also has some walkways for you to ride on, including one sidewalk that you can wrap all the way around the building. Or you can just decide to avoid all the roofing, and instead just take a mushroom and dash through the courtyard and go straight on to the rest of the track. In Dino Jungle, you can actually trick off of some of the dinosaurs, like this green one that walks straight towards you in the beginning. You can drive up it and it'll even give you a little bit of a boost when you go up its nose. And you can use a mushroom to dash through the eggs in the nest nearby. You can also take a dinosaur's back now instead of the top 2 bridges, where it then flings you to the top of where the bridges meet. If you time it right and have enough speed, you can fling off the back of the dinosaur and land on the right rail inside the laboratory, where then you can jump off and there's some more sections for you to check out. For instance, another dinosaur that you can ride to the top of, or you can use some of the geysers in order to fling up to that second path. But this is not the ideal way you want to get up there. Instead of taking the dinosaur, take the lower inside bridge path and charge up a jump onto this left rail, fling onto the wall, and you'll be able to get into the top part of the laboratory. Once up here, you can just drive around the outside of this giant path and then jump over the dinosaur if the T-Rex is coming through. But of course, your best path would be use your mushrooms to get through this entire yard area where the dinosaurs roam. You can dash right between the 2 eggs and pretty much skip everything inside the laboratory. The Great Question Block ruins can be absolutely nuts, so let me show you what you can do. Using 2 mushrooms, you can actually dash through this area with the boxes and use another one right before you hit this rail in order to give you enough momentum to fling yourself over to this inside rail. Now you can actually skip this altogether and instead just drift down like normal and actually fling off to this left wall, which it will automatically bring you up to the rail, where then it will send you into a glider section where you can choose where to go next. If you choose the top left path, you can continue forward, bounce off the cloud, and then off this next ramp, land on the guardrail to the left, and then boost forward so that way you can continue on the track. You can also drive off and just land on this chain and take the lower portion where there's some boost pads and also some more rails for you to take. Now the best bet here is to just jump off of the first rail before jumping onto the second one, which then will lead you to another rail on the right side here. You can also cut the final wraparound short by using a mushroom to dash through the wooden crates. This is one of the hardest shortcuts in the game. You can actually stay on this right rail, ride the chain, and then land on the right side of the pillar. Continue forward, blast through the cones, and you can actually trick off of the ring, off of the side wall, and back onto the track. I know that was a lot, so let me take it a little slower. Right off this final section, you want to hang to the right, get on the rail, and ride the chain. Do a trick at the end of the chain, but don't move too much as you want to trick off of the right side of this pole. Continue forward and barely clip the right side of the far left cone. You're going to want to trick off the outside of the ring, bring your character all the way to the left side of the wall, right up as far as you can go, trick off of the wall, and back onto the track. Trust me, it is very hard, and it's as hard as it looks. You just have to practice it over and over and over again, and eventually you'll get it. Now, if you want, you can improvise this section as you go. Like here, I just used a mushroom, dashed off, bounced off the inside, and just started tricking on whatever I could to continue moving, and it actually ended up working. So only try it if you practice it a lot, because it could actually be very detrimental to you and make you lose a lot more often. But yeah, it's one of the hardest tricks to actually execute in the entire game. Also, there's another hidden shortcut on this track. To the left side of those cones where we just jumped off, you can actually use a mushroom to dash through some crates that'll fling you into the clouds where the track continues. Cheap Falls is pretty simple for the most part. You can use mushrooms to just dash through all the sand sections as much as you can in order to hit those straight lines. In the Big Bend, you can use mushrooms to stay on the outside or just have a really good timed hop and ride up the wall in order to get onto this rail section, where you can then ride this all the way around, back into the river, and then you can jump back onto the wall for an additional trick. You can also jump off the left side of the waterfall, jump off this rock, and land on this tree at the top of the mountain. You then can jump up on the left wall before the final waterfall and ride another rail system that takes you all the way to the end here. It's a pretty cool secret. How ideal is it? It's hard to say right now, but it's still a really cool alternate path to take. And then at the very end, there's a bunch of crates through some grass area and an awning where you can actually dash through. You can actually take this extremely tight and even bust through some of the billboards and signs where the audience is without going out of bounds. Dandelion Depths is another one that's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot here besides a couple of rail sections that you can ride, and of course you can use your mushrooms to dash through the mud areas underneath the ground. One of the major shortcuts / alternate paths on this track is if you stay on this right rail. You can ride it and then eventually jump up on the right wall, which will automatically allow you to ride all the way around the wall and then fling you off on the left bridge. You actually have to trick off of it, so don't forget to do a jump. You also don't have to ride the rail. You can drift all the way down the turn and then jump off of the ramp in order to land on the wall. So the rail is just an optional choice if you want to make it easier on yourself. And then there's one final mud section at the end that you can hit with a tight turn and a mushroom. Boo Cinema really doesn't have any shortcuts. At the very beginning, there's some wooded floors that you can actually use a couple mushrooms to get through, But besides that, it's just kind of messing around with what's there. You can jump on some rails if you want, but I don't know if it's even quicker to do so. When jumping to the screen, you can hang to the left and actually land on the rail, which will grant you a couple of coins. The final section, before you come up on the giant boo, you can jump off and land on the right rail, ride it all the way around, and then flip to the left and land on the second rail as well. Bones Burnout feels like it has a million paths, but it's a lot simpler than it looks. Every lava section that you see, for one, you can actually dash through with a mushroom. It's not like an immediate death if you drive into it like other Mario Kart games, so when you see puddles of lava, don't fear, use your speed items and invincibility as well. You can actually drive right on top of it like it's water, but only if you're using a mushroom. If not, it'll burn you and spin you out for a little bit. So most of your shortcuts and tricks are going to come from the top section of this path. So what you want to do is continue on that bottom path that leads to the top, and then just switch and always stay on the top one. It doesn't matter, you'll always find another path that leads up here, but you can ride on the walls and flip over to the other sides and ride the rails. Lots of wall flips here. If you're flying into the top section of this next part, if you hang to the right, you can ride this rail system pretty much all the way into the end of the race. Just keep jumping onto each new section as you go. Eventually, it will lead you to a sidewall towards the top where you can jump onto that and then fling yourself over to this left ledge, which then will lead you into a final glider section, which will take you to, once again, a higher portion by the finish line. But maybe you want to take the left portion after the glide. Well, there's railing systems over there too, but they do lead you to an alternate choice of routes. If you take this railing system all the way over, it'll eventually end a lot sooner than the right side, leading you down to this bottom section. But another right side wall you can take and bounce off and land on the guardrail by doing a front flip. Remember, do a front flip off of this wall. If you do a left flip, it'll fling you way too far over, making it nearly impossible for you to land on that little rail. And then down here, you'll see a long stretch of wall hanging out. You can actually ride this wall as well, where it will automatically bring you to the top, where you can fling into a ring and glide a little bit into the top section by the finish line. Now, if you're stuck on the bottom portion, don't fret, because there are right and left rails that help get you back to the top areas and hit some of those shortcuts that I just talked to you about. So definitely use those if you're stuck down there and want to get to a higher portion. Moving on to the Lightning Cup, we have Mumu Meadows, which doesn't have much. It's just a lot of grass that you can use speed items through, like mushrooms or stars, in order to just skip parts of the track. There's also a lot of sections where you can race on the outside of the white picket fence using your mushrooms and run straight through the bales of hay. One path I like to take is off this mini ramp, jump onto the white picket fence, and then jump off to the right, and then dash again with your mushrooms over to this secret left portion. Besides that, there's not much else this course offers in terms of shortcuts. On Choco Mountain, there's actually lots of mud piles that you can just use a mushroom to get straight through. I mean, a majority of this track is just covered in mud, so mushrooms are vital here. On this ramp section, you can actually jump off into this left wall and ride it to the ledge. Mushrooms make it easier, but you can do it without a mushroom at the right angle. But if you take this path to the ledge, it's probably smart to have mushrooms on you, because you're going to land straight down into the mud afterward. The final turn towards the ramp section at the end, you can get on this left guardrail, and you can ride it all the way to the end by left flipping up onto this billboard, and you can grind on the billboard and on another rail before jumping down to the final goal. There's also a right rail that you can hit before going up the hill. You can jump on this rail and then flip right onto the wall, and it'll automatically take you up to another rail section where you can then flip down back onto the track. If you really want to be fancy and get onto the ground quicker, you can flip onto the billboard from that left rail and back onto the track again real quick. Toad's Factory added a lot of new tricks that you can hit, including this first one. When you get into the factory, you can jump up onto this wall, take a high route, and then land on the top part. You can take another rail and back off the wall again to continue going. When you get outside to the conveyor belts, you can also hang to the right or to the left and grind on lots of the rails that are on the outsides of the conveyor belts. Back inside the factory, there's a rail above you that would be easier to reach with a feather, but not necessarily a shortcut. But then there's one massive shortcut before exiting the factory. When you're exiting, make sure you hang to the left. You want to land on the left rail of the beam, then flip over immediately to the right rail of this beam and flip over quickly again in order to reach these rails and machines to the right to trick off of. This is going to take lots of timing practice and also knowing which rails to hit and paying attention to the moving conveyors as well and the moving machines that are pushing the mud back and forth. Bowser's Castle can be a real monster if you don't know how to tackle it. Immediately, the inside breaks into two paths. You can jump off the walls in order to jump onto one of the rails. But this next trick here, to me, was the hardest to hit in this entire game. You have to hit a mini turbo to the right, a super mini turbo to the left, hold a jump, flip into the left wall, and reach all the way over to the other side of the gap without having to even cross that entire section. It saves a bunch of time, but let me slow it down so I can tell you exactly how this works. Mini turbo to the right, then a super mini turbo to the left, and then hold the jump button while staying straight and not hitting that right wall. Make sure that you're just right of the left wall and flip into the left wall and the ledge, and it should prop you over the next wall. Trust me when I say this takes a very long time to get. I mean, I seriously sat and tried this for over 30 minutes and only managed to get it twice. It is very, very difficult and definitely not practical when it comes to actually like online play or racing against others. On the outside of Bowser's Castle, you can also take one of two chains on the left and on the right sides. Once you go up these chains, it will then take you to a section of pipes. Flip over to the left pipe and then flip left back onto the track. You then can ride the side of a Bowser crate before flipping right back onto the track again. It's actually a really fun and satisfying shortcut. We then can use our prior knowledge of how mushrooms work in this game and just use mushrooms on top of the lava just to completely dodge any type of damage from it, and also skip parts of the track. And finally, we have this special cup with Acorn Heights, which has a lot of different branching paths. At the very beginning, you can take one of two rails, one to the right and one to the left, or a third one that actually branches over the second one, but you know what, it's not even worth it at times. But for the most part, it's just a couple of rails. There's nothing really special about this. They all lead right to the same spot just a second later. Now, this flying glider section I like to think has three separate paths. The right one is bouncing off of leaves and that mushroom in order to stay along the right side. Jump onto this rail, fling onto the second rail, and stay hugging that wall. Stay jumping off the leaf and riding the side wall here where you can jump onto another leaf across the section, which can immediately shoot you over to the last part of the track. This is a very good shortcut if you don't have any mushrooms. The second path takes you down the middle, just jumping off of leaves and more mushrooms once again and finding any vines to grind off of while you can. It's a pretty basic path, but there is a shortcut at the bottom of the hill. If you look to the left, you'll see some crates and a mud area where you can take a mushroom and dash right through it. The third and final path has you flying down towards the left wall, and there's a lot of vines that hug that left wall that you can switch in between. In the final section, take the vine on the left middle and ride it and immediately hop over to the left one without wasting too much time, and the same thing for the third vine. And then you can use a mushroom to dash through the last grass section. It's actually a very quick shortcut. Mario Circuit is as basic as they come. There's really not much you can do besides maybe try to jump over a couple of the blocks, but for the most part, you're just going to be using invincibility items and speed items like mushrooms in order to dash through any open sections of sand that can just cut the course in half. For instance, take this giant section of grass and dirt that you can just pretty much cut in half with a couple of mushrooms. Or this section right here on lap 3 where you can just dash in a straight line if you have 3 mushrooms through 3 different sand bins. And then there's another portion towards the end of Mario Circuit 3 where you can dash through the colored blocks. So once again, it just depends on what items you have and what type of shortcut that you think would work best for you in each area. And last but not least, we have Rainbow Road, and you might think there's not much here that you can actually use as a shortcut. There is a couple small ones that maybe you didn't think about. In the first section where the paths branch, make sure you pick the one to the right, and if you have a mushroom, you can actually jump off the road right before it bends back down in order to jump back onto the opposite path. On lap 2, in the water section, you can actually use a mushroom to drive over here in the grass and jump off this dirt road. And at the beginning of lap 3 inside the space station, there's a very tiny shortcut with a little ramp over in the red girder area where you need a mushroom in order to reach as well. And then in the final section, you can use mushrooms to dash over any of the grass and watery areas that's left over. And with that, that's every single shortcut and secret path in Mario Kart World. Now that was a lot of paths, so please show some love by leaving a like and subscribing if I was able to help you out in any sort of way with any of these shortcuts, and definitely let me know if I missed any, because this game is still new and there could be a chance that I missed a couple. But thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe before you head out, and I hope you all have a blessed day. See you guys.